Humanity had always dreamed of exploring the stars, of reaching out beyond their home planet to discover what lay in the vastness of space. For years, they had sent missions, built colonies on distant moons, and established outposts in the darkest corners of the galaxy. But nothing had prepared them for what they were about to face. The humans had come across a region of space marked on every map, but rarely ever visited. It was labeled as Dominion territory, an area ruled by a powerful and feared alien empire. The Dominion were known across the galaxy for their strength, their ruthlessness, and their absolute control over the territories they claimed. No species had dared to challenge them for centuries, and those who had were wiped out without mercy. Most ships that ventured too far into Dominion space never returned. Yet, despite all the warnings, humanity had pushed forward. A massive human fleet, led by Commander Rachel Hayes, entered the region, their mission clear: to make contact, to learn, and perhaps to expand humanity's reach further into the universe. But as their ships crossed the boundary into Dominion space, an eerie silence fell over the fleet. The vast expanse of space suddenly felt oppressive, as though they were no longer welcome in this part of the galaxy. Commander Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Endurance, staring at the monitor ahead. Her crew moved in a quiet urgency, preparing for the unknown. The fleet was fully armed, just in case, but no one knew what to expect. They had only one mission: to make first contact. Then, the silence was broken. A message arrived, not from a nearby planet or ship, but from the vast emptiness of space itself. The message was short, cold, and to the point. Leave this space. You are trespassing. This is Dominion territory. Turn around now, or face the consequences. It was the first time anyone had spoken to them, and the message was clear: they were not welcome. The Dominion had no interest in negotiating, no interest in alliances. Their message was a threat. A warning to turn back before things escalated. But Commander Hayes refused to back down. The humans had come too far, worked too hard to back away now. They had no intention of retreating. The crew of the Endurance waited, holding their breath, as Hayes' voice echoed through the ship. We will not turn back. We are here to stay. The words hung in the air. The Dominion's response, though unknown, was sure to come soon. A chill ran through the crew as the ships in the fleet powered up, ready for whatever was to come next. This wasn't just a space mission anymore. It was a statement. Humanity would not be intimidated. The seconds ticked by slowly, and the tension grew thicker. The Dominion were known for their power, their advanced technology, and their brutal tactics. No one knew what to expect, but the fear was palpable. Would they destroy the human fleet? Would they wipe out their ships before they could even blink? Suddenly, the calm of space was shattered as a massive alien ship appeared out of nowhere. It was enormous, dwarfing the human vessels by miles. The ship was dark, almost black, with sharp angles and menacing designs etched into its hull. This was a ship of war, not one meant for diplomacy. And it was now directly in front of the human fleet. The crew of the Endurance watched in awe and fear. The ship did not speak. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to send a clear message: the Dominion were here, and they were not playing games. The message was undeniable. The Dominion had arrived. Humanity had made its first move in a new chapter of space exploration. But now, as the fleet faced the terrifying unknown, one thing was clear: they were no longer just explorers. They were intruders in a galaxy ruled by the Dominion. And the consequences of their refusal to turn back were yet to be seen. Would they survive this first encounter? Or would they become just another forgotten species in the Dominion's ever-expanding empire? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: humanity had made its choice. And they would not go down without a fight. The silence that followed the arrival of the Dominion ship was suffocating. Commander Rachel Hayes stood at the helm of the Endurance, her eyes fixed on the massive warship that now loomed in front of them. The crew aboard her flagship was tense, unsure of what would happen next. The Dominion had made their presence known, but there was no response, no warning, no words. Only the massive shadow of their vessel casting a dark cloud over the human fleet. For a moment, it seemed as though the Dominion ship might just observe, might let the humans go on their way. But that hope was quickly crushed. The Dominion ship began to power up, a deep hum resonating throughout space as its weapon systems came online. Suddenly, there was a flash, a brilliant, blinding light shot out from the ship, slamming into one of the human vessels, the Vanguard. The explosion sent debris scattering through space. The Dominion had fired the first shot. Commander Hayes watched in disbelief as the Vanguard was torn apart by the powerful energy beam. Her crew stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The Dominion, it seemed, were not interested in talks. They were not interested in diplomacy. They were here to send a message: humans did not belong in their space. Return fire. Hayes shouted, snapping out of her shock. She turned to her weapons officer. Target their engines and weapons systems. We can't afford to lose anyone else. The Endurance and the remaining ships in the fleet immediately opened fire, sending salvo after salvo of plasma and energy bolts toward the Dominion warship. But the Dominion ship didn't even flinch. It was as though their weapons had no effect at all. The alien ship's shields were far too strong, absorbing the blasts like they were nothing more than raindrops. The human fleet's firepower seemed to be barely a nuisance. A loud alarm rang out across the ship. The enemy ship had locked onto the Endurance, and a massive energy beam began charging up. The crew scrambled, but there was little they could do. They could see the devastating beam building power, and it was coming straight for them. Brace for impact. Hayes ordered, gripping the edge of the command chair. Her heart raced, and for a moment, everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. Then, in the blink of an eye, the energy beam was released. The blast hit the Endurance with the force of a small sun, shaking the entire ship. Lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the strain of the hit. But somehow, they had survived. The shields were still holding, barely, but it would only be a matter of time before they failed. Hayes' mind raced as she thought through their options. There was no way they could outfight the Dominion with brute force. The odds were stacked too high against them. But then, as if by sheer instinct, she recalled something that had been drilled into her crew during training. Every enemy has a weakness. You just have to find it. Lieutenant, are the enemy ship's weapons arrays all concentrated in one place? She asked urgently. The weapons officer quickly ran the calculations, eyes flicking over the holographic displays in front of him. Yes, Commander. They're all aligned along their front section. But it's heavily shielded. Then we need to hit them where it hurts, Hayes said with determination. All ships, focus your fire on their engines. If we can disable their propulsion, we might stand a chance. The crew of the Endurance snapped into action, their minds shifting from fear to resolve. The battle was far from over, and if humanity was going to survive, they had to be smarter, quicker, and more adaptable than the Dominion ever expected. The human ships changed their tactics, concentrating their fire on the Dominion ship's rear. It was a risky move. The Dominion could easily retaliate with another devastating blast. But they had no other choice. For a few tense moments, the space around them became a chaotic dance of laser fire, explosions, and near misses. The Dominion ship's shields flickered as the human fleet's coordinated fire began to make a dent. But the Dominion didn't back down. They sent a devastating wave of counter-fire, crippling one of the smaller human ships, the Crusader. The crew aboard the Crusader never stood a chance. They were overwhelmed in seconds. But it wasn't enough to break the human will. In a bold move, Commander Hayes ordered her fleet to make a high-speed pass, close to the Dominion ship. As the ships roared past, they released a barrage of missile fire, hoping to catch the Dominion ship off guard. A moment of silence followed as the missiles hit their target. Then, an explosion. The Dominion ship's shields flickered again, this time, more severely. The humans had succeeded in creating a small opening. Now! Hayes shouted. All ships, full assault on their engines. This is our chance. The fleet surged forward, giving everything they had. The Dominion ship's engines finally began to show signs of damage. It was slowing down, its massive hull beginning to drift. Commander Hayes allowed herself a moment of relief, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion might have been taken by surprise, but they would regroup. The next move would be theirs. The battle had only just begun. The Dominion had fired the first shot, but humanity wasn't backing down. They had sent their own message: we will fight. We will not surrender. As the human fleet pounded relentlessly on the Dominion ship, the stakes of the battle grew clearer with each passing minute. The Dominion, though wounded, were not backing down. In fact, their response was growing fiercer by the second, with more warships emerging from the depths of space. It felt as though the entire Dominion fleet was closing in on the human vessels, pushing them further toward the edge of defeat. But then, something extraordinary happened. Just as it seemed the Dominion would wipe them out, a strange anomaly appeared on the fleet scanners. At first, it was just a flicker, a distortion in the fabric of space, like a tear in the very stars themselves. But the distortion grew quickly, and before anyone could react, it began to take shape. Out of the void, a fleet of ships emerged, unlike anything the humans had ever seen. These new ships were sleek, with a strange, elegant design, nothing like the heavy, brutal warships of the Dominion. Their surfaces shimmered with an ethereal glow, almost like a blend of light and darkness. They moved with a grace that seemed unnatural for vessels of war, and their presence immediately sent a wave of confusion through the Dominion forces. The human fleet sensors lit up with activity as the unknown ships made their move. These mysterious vessels, all of them armed with advanced weaponry, opened fire on the Dominion fleet without warning. Energy beams struck the Dominion ships, powerful enough to cause massive damage. It was the kind of firepower the humans could only dream of wielding. What in the name of the stars is that? Lieutenant Carter, the communications officer, asked in disbelief. Are they, with us? Commander Hayes murmured, still unable to comprehend what was happening. For a moment, it felt like a dream, an impossible turn of events. The Dominion were being pushed back, and it wasn't the humans who were doing it. Negative, Commander, replied Lieutenant Carter after a moment of hesitation. They're not responding to our comms. But they're definitely helping. A soft, almost ethereal voice crackled over the comms, cutting through the chaos of the battle. It wasn't in any language the humans recognized, but somehow, it still resonated deep within their minds. The words weren't spoken aloud, they felt more like thoughts, like an internal message. Humanity, you have shown courage. We are here to assist. The voice seemed to echo through the minds of the crew, its meaning clear, yet unsettling. Before they could process the message, one of the mysterious ships shot past the Endurance, its sleek form weaving through the Dominion warships with ease. It fired a concentrated energy pulse, cutting through a Dominion vessel like it was nothing more than paper. The alien ship danced between the explosions, dodging every attack sent its way, making the Dominion appear sluggish and ineffective in comparison. These ships. Commander Hayes whispered, her voice filled with awe. They're incredible. The human ships, inspired by the unexpected help, found a new sense of determination. The tide of the battle began to shift, as the Dominion ships struggled to adapt to the new threat. But even as the Dominion began to retreat, their fleet pulling back to regroup, one of their commanders sent a chilling transmission. Do not think this is over, humans. You have stirred something far more dangerous than you can comprehend. The mysterious fleet didn't respond. Instead, they continued to work alongside the human ships, pushing the Dominion back into the depths of their space. The Dominion were retreating, but they weren't done yet. The unknown ships were fighting for something greater, and the humans were beginning to realize that they might have just made a new ally, though their intentions were still shrouded in mystery. As the battle subsided, the strange ships didn't stay long. After a final salvo of fire that crippled the last of the Dominion ships, they began to retreat into the vast emptiness from which they came. They left no message, no sign of their purpose, and yet, their presence had been enough to shift the course of the battle. The human fleet watched as the ships disappeared into the void. Their sudden appearance had been the turning point in the battle, but who were these mysterious beings? And why had they chosen to help? Commander Hayes stood at the helm of the Endurance, her mind racing. The battle had been won, but the questions that remained were endless. Who were these allies? What was their connection to the Dominion? And why had they chosen to intervene at that exact moment? Lieutenant, can we track them? Hayes asked, still gazing into the vastness of space where the ships had vanished. Carter shook his head. Negative, Commander. They've vanished without a trace. No sign of their ships. No energy readings. It's like they were never here. It was as though the mysterious fleet had never existed at all, leaving nothing behind but the remains of a fierce battle and the feeling that something much larger was at play. The crew of the Endurance took a moment to process what had just happened. The Dominion had been forced to retreat, and humanity had survived, but the mystery of the unknown fleet loomed over them, unanswered and unsettling. Their victory was only the beginning of something far more complicated, something that would push humanity deeper into the unknown. With their new allies' intervention, humanity had proven it would not be intimidated. But the real question remained, what would the Dominion do next? And what was the true purpose behind the mysterious fleet that had appeared from the shadows to save them? The battle had been won, but the war, whatever it was, had just begun. The human fleet, now victorious in the battle against the Dominion, floated in a temporary calm, but the tension was far from over. The destruction of the Dominion ships and the unexpected intervention of the mysterious fleet had created an uneasy sense of victory. Commander Rachel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Endurance, her eyes fixed on the empty space ahead. The Dominion had retreated for now, but that was unlikely to last long. Commander, Lieutenant Carter spoke, his voice filled with both concern and awe. We've received a new message from the Dominion. It's a threat, and it's different this time. Hayes turned toward the comms officer. She had been expecting this. The Dominion had been dealt a significant blow, but they would never allow themselves to be humiliated for long. Put it through, Lieutenant, Hayes ordered, crossing her arms as she braced herself for what was to come. The message came through loud and clear, echoing across the bridge. The voice of the Dominion commander was cold, full of malice, and laced with a deadly promise. Humanity, you have underestimated the power of the Dominion. This is not over. You may have won this skirmish, but you will not survive the next. We are sending the Reaper. The comms crackled as the transmission ended, and the bridge fell into a heavy silence. The Reaper, every ship in the galaxy feared the name. It was a ship of legend, the Dominion's most advanced weapon of war, a behemoth capable of decimating entire fleets with its weapons and technology far beyond what any other race could imagine. The humans had learned of the Reaper's existence in passing, but no one had ever believed it was real. The Dominion had always kept it hidden, an unspoken threat. Now, it seemed the legend was about to come to life. Commander, we need to prepare, Lieutenant Carter said, looking at Hayes with a mixture of dread and determination. If the Reaper is coming, we don't stand a chance without more firepower. I know, Hayes replied, her voice tight. But we're not backing down. We've made it this far, and we will stand our ground. The human fleet began to move into formation, organizing their ships for a defensive stance. Their ships were powerful, but they were not prepared for the Reaper. It was a force unlike anything they had ever seen. The mysterious fleet that had helped them in the past might not be able to save them this time. Humanity was on their own. Days passed, and the tension continued to build. The fleet drifted toward a large, abandoned station that had once been a human research outpost. It was a perfect location to make a stand, isolated, with limited escape routes, but it offered a place where they could gather their resources and make their last stand. The crew worked tirelessly, refueling ships, preparing weapons, and fortifying the station. The atmosphere on the Endurance was grim, but there was also a sense of unity. No one had expected to survive this long, and now they had no choice but to fight for their lives. Then, one fateful morning, the sensors on the Endurance picked up something that chilled everyone to the bone. A massive signature appeared on the radar, growing larger with each passing moment. "It's the Reaper," Lieutenant Carter whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. The massive ship slowly emerged from the darkness of deep space. It was enormous, easily dwarfing anything the humans had ever seen. Its hull was dark, almost black, and it seemed to absorb the light around it. At the front, a massive cannon hummed with energy, an unmistakable sign of the weapon's destructive power. The Reaper had arrived. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The human fleet was outmatched. The Reaper's weapons could destroy their ships with a single strike. There was no retreat, no escape. The battle would be fought to the bitter end. "All ships, prepare for battle," Hayes ordered, her voice steady but filled with the weight of what was to come. "We fight for humanity." The human fleet positioned itself around the station, their ships readying their weapons and shields. Hayes could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders, knowing this could be the end. But she refused to let fear take over. This was their moment, their stand. Humanity would not be erased without a fight. The Reaper moved into position, and with a sudden, terrifying flash of light, its primary weapon charged. A massive beam of energy shot out, striking the human defense perimeter with devastating force. The energy from the blast shook the entire station, causing alarms to go off across the fleet. Ships were thrown back, some destroyed instantly. The human fleet was already feeling the strain. Hayes knew they couldn't take another hit like that. "Focus fire on its weapons array," she shouted. "All ships, target its cannon." The humans fired everything they had, but their weapons barely left a scratch on the Reaper's hull. The massive warship continued its relentless assault, taking out ships with ease. But just as all hope seemed lost, the unexpected happened. From the dark reaches of space, a sudden flare of energy appeared. The mysterious fleet had returned. They had been watching from afar, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now, they had arrived in full force. With their advanced technology and seemingly endless firepower, the mysterious fleet launched an all-out assault on the Reaper. Their ships danced around the massive Dominion ship, dodging fire and delivering precise, devastating strikes to its vital systems. The Reaper fired back, its cannon unleashing wave after wave of energy, but the mysterious fleet was too fast, too elusive. They worked together with the human fleet, coordinating their attacks and weakening the Reaper's defenses. For the first time in the battle, the Reaper's shields began to flicker. It was no longer invincible. "Now!" Hayes shouted, a fierce determination in her voice. "All ships, target its engines. This is our chance." With one final, desperate push, the combined forces of humanity and their mysterious allies launched everything they had at the Reaper's propulsion systems. The Reaper's massive engines exploded in a brilliant burst of light, and the mighty warship began to drift, its power slipping away. The Dominion had underestimated humanity once again. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had a real chance at survival. And in that moment, Commander Hayes knew that this was only the beginning. The war for the galaxy was just heating up. The Reaper, once an unstoppable force of destruction, now drifted helplessly in space, its once glowing engines reduced to twisted wreckage. The combined might of the human fleet and their mysterious allies had succeeded in disabling its propulsion. But the victory came at a steep cost. The human fleet was battered, with several ships either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The Endurance itself had taken heavy damage, and many of the crew were injured, their spirits beginning to waver after days of relentless combat. Commander Rachel Hayes stood at the bridge of the Endurance, looking out at the massive, disabled ship that had once seemed invincible. A sense of triumph filled the air, but it was tempered with an overwhelming uncertainty. The Dominion were not known for backing down easily. They would regroup, rebuild, and they would strike again. Humanity's struggle for survival was far from over. "Commander," Lieutenant Carter spoke, his voice tense, "we've got incoming transmissions from the Dominion." "It's their commander. He says they'll destroy us all." Hayes clenched her fists, her mind racing. They had won this battle, but it was only a temporary victory. What if the Dominion had something worse waiting in the wings? What if the Reaper was just the beginning of an even greater, more terrifying weapon? "Put it through," Hayes ordered, her voice unwavering, though the uncertainty gnawed at her insides. The screen on the bridge flickered to life, and the familiar face of the Dominion commander appeared, his expression filled with disdain. "You may have defeated the Reaper, humans," he said, his voice cold and venomous. "But you have no idea what you've truly unleashed. We have the means to destroy your entire species, and we will use it. There is no mercy. No retreat. This war will end with your obliteration." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a chilling silence behind. Hayes could feel the weight of the threat pressing down on her chest. The Dominion were capable of far more than they had shown, and now they knew exactly where humanity stood, on the brink of annihilation. "What now, Commander?" Lieutenant Carter asked quietly, the question hanging in the air. Hayes looked out at the wreckage of the Reaper, then turned to face her crew. "We don't back down. We never back down. Humanity's strength lies in its resolve. The Dominion may have more weapons, but we have something they don't, hope. And that's something they can never take from us." The crew nodded, their expressions hardening with renewed determination. They were battered, bruised, and running on fumes, but they were still alive, and that was enough. As long as they still had the will to fight, they would not give up. But Hayes knew that mere resolve would not be enough. The Dominion would return, and when they did, they would bring their full might to bear. The war was far from over. And there was no guarantee humanity would survive the next wave of the Dominion's fury. Suddenly, the sensors on the Endurance went off again, drawing Hayes' attention. Something was approaching, fast. But it wasn't another Dominion ship. The sensors couldn't recognize the signature, and the blip on the radar was growing larger by the second. "Commander, it's them again," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The mysterious fleet. They've returned." Hayes stared at the screen as a new fleet of ships appeared on the radar. The sleek, ethereal vessels, glowing with strange energy, entered the fray. But this time, they didn't come to simply assist. They moved with a clear purpose. Their ships surrounded the Endurance and the rest of the human fleet, a protective barrier of sorts. But even as they entered the space around the humans, there was no sign of communication. They simply watched. A sudden wave of tension gripped the bridge. Were they here to help again? Or had they been playing some deeper game all along, manipulating the humans for their own purposes? "Do we trust them?" Lieutenant Carter asked, his voice filled with doubt. "We have no choice," Hayes said. "We've already seen what they're capable of. They've helped us before. But I can't ignore the feeling that there's more to their involvement than meets the eye. For now, we need their help. They might be our only shot at survival." As the mysterious fleet took its position around the human ships, something strange happened. A signal, clear and unmistakable, came through the comms. It wasn't a spoken message. Instead, it was a vision, a holographic image of a towering figure, humanoid in shape, but with an alien, almost divine presence. The figure's face was calm, its eyes filled with ancient wisdom and power. The message wasn't spoken aloud, but somehow, the meaning was understood by every human on the bridge. "The time has come, humans. You have shown your strength, and you have earned the right to know the truth." The figure's image faded, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Commander Hayes' mind raced. The truth? What truth? "We need to prepare," Hayes said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "We've come this far, but there's more at play here than we know. We've made it through the first wave, but the real challenge is just beginning. The mysterious fleet continued to maintain their position, creating a formidable defensive perimeter. The Dominion's ships were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike again. But for now, humanity had a fragile shield of hope. "We've won one battle," Hayes said, looking at her crew, "but this is just the beginning. The true war is yet to come. And it's not just about fighting the Dominion anymore. We need to find out who our new allies really are, and what their purpose is." The crew of the Endurance stood together, battered but unbroken. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they knew that the challenges ahead would be unlike anything they had faced before. The Dominion would not stop. The mysterious fleet's motives were still unclear. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven it would not go down without a fight. The war was far from over.